Hi Jams, today I want to talk about some accommodations I have made or I make for myself as someone with both ADHD and autism, and how that has supported me, especially, with my relationships, emotional health, and of course, my skin and reproductive health. So let us go. The first and most important thing is I speak positively to myself, and that is very vital because oftentimes when you have, ADHD or autism, you might struggle with guilt. You might struggle with feeling dumb. Or you might struggle with feeling too much. And you might also struggle with letting go of emotions, being stuck with them or being stuck in a loop of reactivity. But one of the things I do is positivity. And how do I do that? Very simple things is I start off the morning. I have like a recorded thing where I record my bonus beliefs. So most of the things that were major insecurities and fears for me the past few years, I recorded. It's an exercise from my Level Up Strategy Workbook, which you can get here. So I recorded the positive, the abundance belief version of this limiting belief, or like fear-based thoughts that I've held. And so I listen to it almost every other morning. I used to listen to it every morning in 2024, and it really shifted like my internal, not only my internal state, but even the world around me, how I perceive the world around me, how I believe myself, how I think of myself, and even how I interact with the world, thereby impacting how the world interacts with me. It's so cool. So that's that. I always read my favorite Bible verse that really just speaks to like my core needs, because hey, I truly believe God is my mother, God is my father, and they are always there for me. She's nurturing, He's protecting, and I really need that daily reminder. That being said, I start off the day with gratitude, also recalling. So that's another accommodation, always recalling what I'm grateful for that particular day, and also how I showed up for myself the previous day. That is very vital because emotional regulation is one of the things, if you have ADHD, you will struggle with, like in different forms and capacity. So yeah, that being said, the next thing I usually do is everything that I need is within sight. So it sounds funny, but that's one major accommodation. Everything that I need or I use daily frequently is within sight. Also, here's a pro tip. What I'm going to need to use, I also keep within sight. What does that mean? I don't keep my laundry in the laundry basket, even though I have a laundry basket. The laundry basket is for actually just like packing in dry clothes off the wire and folding them immediately as I'm picking them off the wire. That's another accommodation, because I've learned that if my brain is going through a step process of how a series of chores or things should work, I've learned not to like stop it and be like, oh no, I'll just, because hey, dopamine is high at that time, whatever. Number two, I said number two, but another point back to is I always think of tasks in full, not like, oh, you know what, I'll just cook a meal. There's a process to cooking a meal, and then I will check, okay, what are the processes, what's my energy level right now, and how can I boost my oxytocin so that fuels me and regulates me to carry out the task. Keyword I use is oxytocin, not just dopamine. So another accommodation would be, for example, I usually would download certain videos or that talk about like things I'm interested in on YouTube, and I would listen to them while I do that process of activity, from cooking to laundry, just to have the effect called the double body effect, which helps with people who are neurodivergent, actually if you have ADHD, to have that company that keeps you there. And I'm learning something new, so it's kind of like I'm satisfying that part of me, the autistic part of me that loved a good deep dive, hyper focusing on a particular topic to the death. So that's another accommodation. What's another accommodation for me is that I have a roster of social interactions I have to get out of the day, which satisfies or supports my artistic side. Let me put it that way. That means that within a day or within a week, there are some people I know I have to talk to. Like if it was left to me, I wouldn't bother, to be honest. But I love them, they love me, and I show up for them. Okay, so that has helped me a lot. Like I have to speak to my mom daily. I have to speak to my siblings at least 2 days. At least 2 days. Most times, maybe daily. My father, same. I check on like my connector, my business, like my clients, my best customers, at least weekly or bi-weekly, things like that. Having that structured as like a chore that I need to or get to do or have to do is really, really helpful. Another thing is I really work with cycle syncing a lot to help me with energy management, because ADHD, right, you're struggling with like inconsistent dopamine and things like that, and regulating like your ability to take action and things and being consistent in quote. So when I cycle my activities with the phases of my menstrual cycle, my menstrual and freedom rhythm, plus the moon cycle, it helps me be supported by not only my body but by also nature. So kind of like cycler provision, something like that. That's another accommodation. Another accommodation is I have somebody that I share stuff with that kind of serves as a reminder. And when I don't have that, I have like alarm clocks. If you see my alarm clock page, when I'm deleting off old alarms, I'm laughing at the other things I have an alarm for. Speaking of alarms, another accommodation is drinking water. That is a reminder. Drinking water and doing stress relief stretches for my jaw, because clenching the jaw is like a whole last thing. Okay, so the other accommodation, I always simplify things, and I think because of how I interpret the world. So because I simplify things, I make things easier for other people. And that's one of the most fascinating things. Over the years, through different places I have worked at, people always comment about, oh my goodness, Adaeze or Feyisayo, she's just so easy to work with. She has a way of being, she does things simply. I think because I've worked in areas that have my passion and my interest, so in a way, that's another accommodation. When I work on projects, they feature my passions, my interests, my talents, my gifts. I really go hardcore with them. So it's easy for me to take the best traits of both like my autism and my ADHD brain and pour that into my work. Another accommodation is I'm comfortable verbally stating when I need a break, when I need space, extracting myself from situations, no guilt whatsoever. It's like, this is a lot. I'm going to go outside and take a fresher breath air, literally, or ground myself, like pull off my heels and just sit somewhere and just take in the air. And I think it's so fascinating. There's something about just you taking that space out for yourself and just to regulate yourself, have that break. Another accommodation is I do give myself time where I schedule social interactions around my ovulation, when I have more energy thanks to like my hormones and obviously what I'm eating to support my hormones at that particular time and other neurotransmitters in my brain. So I will schedule a lot of social interactions. Oh, the birds just sound so incredible at the farmhouse this morning. So I will schedule my interactions around my ovulation most of the time, or when I have that spike in energy. That being said, so that I'm not exhausted. Another accommodation that I make is I have lists and I take notes, because I've just learned over time that my brain, she works like probably a submarine, I presume, So as a shit analogy, but let's go with it. So I do take notes with conversations. I'm always like, write it down. And that's another thing that contributes to that is that I'm actually like a trained lawyer. So it's like, write it down. I want to see it written, write it down, send it to me, or I write it down and send it to you for you to like check like, oh, this is exactly what you're saying. Which leads me to another accommodation where it is very easy for you to disassociate during conversations or social interactions. How do I help myself with that? Well, I just disassociate because something you said made me remember something or made me feel something, and I'm going to go with that feeling. But when I do come back, I've learned to ask people to repeat themselves. Say again is one thing. I say, oh, what do you mean by that? For further explanation, which also helps me when I'm missing like subtext when people are speaking with me. I've learned that as a woman, we're socialized to be, what's the word? Women are just socialized to be less confident. So I do not say phrases that come off as someone who is disempowered. Like I don't say sorry too much. I don't apologize too much. In fact, if I'm not sharing my experiences in a way that empower me or others, I would not overly emphasize things somebody would call in quotes shortcomings. So I don't apologize if I just associate. I just say, oh, say again. I don't say, oh, sorry. I'm dumb, I'm crazy, I'm upset, I'm scatterbrained. I don't say negative things about myself, not anymore. Maybe years ago. Another thing is I write daily mini essays. I read a lot. I read a lot. I consume intellectual media a lot. Things that have to do with my special interests when I'm going through like hyper focus, or just like with my business and things like that. Like I'm just like, so I write mini essays, and these mini essays that I write when I read or consume like digital media are things that now form my own personal resource materials for me writing, like the either blog posts or the health letters, healing letters I write to like my community, the connector community, or even in conversations. So the basic structure of my mini essays are, number one, of course, my title, which is obviously the title of whatever it is I read that I'm writing the mini essay on. About 3 paragraphs that summarizes my thoughts. Well, the first paragraph will summarize whatever I read, what it is. Second paragraph mostly will be my thoughts, and the third paragraph will be a summary of a mixture of like, what I read and my thoughts on that. And then I would have like the reference, which is what's the material, the author, the date it was written on, and when I read it, and probably a link to it if it's something that has been published digitally. And this is so fascinating because I write mini essays not just about, vitamin D and emotional regulation, but I write more about neurotransmitters or, the impact of certain things we eat and anxiety and depression. I write about so many things. I also write about, for example, now Heated Rivalry, which is a book I love. I read it like in 2022, the whole Game Changers series. Shout out to Rachel Reed, and it's been adapted into a television series. So I've been like listening to a lot of analysis by other lovers of the series and the shows, and there's just been so many people's opinions and things like that. So I find myself having like these little mini essays, and I'm reading fan fictions, and I think I find it so fascinating because it gives me like a richer in-depth into the fan fictions I'm reading. And of course my own, I had to go and reread the books anyway, just Heated Rivalry and The Long Game. That being said, that leads me to another thing. So here's another thing which is fascinating but off tangent I want to mention. When I was watching Heated Rivalry, there's so many things the character Shane Hollander was doing, who is canonically autistic. And I was like, oh, this is normal, because there are things I do in my life. And I was watching a couple of people's interactions who were like, oh, that's very autistic. I was like, really? Is that, or is that like just normal, basic hygiene, timely hygiene that just makes sense? Which brings me enough of I don't want to even get started on Heated Rivalry. If you want us to chat about that and you're a fan, comment to this audio and let me know if you want me to go in deeper. Back to what we're saying. Over the years, I grew up with a mom who is obviously also has ADHD, and there's just accommodations she has also thought that has worked for her and worked for me to, be functioning as a functioning young woman and also be healthy. And I think another thing to note is I've learned, like, my first reaction to things, I don't really say it out loud if I'm not with like trusted people. For example, if somebody announces like a family member just had a child, even though they have many children, I have in certain circumstances been like, another child in this economy, but like, congratulations, that's a very autistic thing to do. And you might come off as an ass. In fact, I think a huge part of my reputation in university as, oh, she's quirky, or she's blunt, literally it was just me being autistic, to be honest. And I think I'm not cruel. So it's striking that balance where you are authentically yourself, but it's coming from a place that is rooted in love and kindness. So now I'm older, of course, I'm not somebody who is in her late teens or early 20s. Like, my frontal lobe is developed, with thank God, which brings me back to another accommodation. I take my boundaries seriously. I have my core values, I hold myself to specific standards, and I have my boundaries that protect my standards. So I do not joke with that. The boundaries are very, very necessary for self-help. It lets me know that I respect myself and I trust myself, and I keep my standards with myself, because our standards form like our emotional baseline. So you want to raise like your ability to receive all of the things you desire. You also raise the standard of who you are to be the person who can not only receive but also like steward and manage those things. So that's another accommodation for myself, and that shows up in like my skincare routine. How even if which brings me to another accommodation, I do not have my bath at night with the lights in my bathroom turned on. This helps me feel less overly stimulated. Yes, so that's it. I also shift like how I have my baths in the morning. It could be really, really early before dawn, or just as the dawn is like rising, so I get to see this beautiful view here at the farmhouse of the sunrise, just really gorgeous. Or I have it like mid-morning after like a sunshine walk and things like that. It really just like depends on me. Being able to soften in my body and knowing that I have this strength, I have the devotion, which is discipline rooted in love, and I have the diligence to take care of myself, to show up for myself, to be present, and I don't have to beat myself up to conform to an idea of what that diligence looks like, has been a game changer. There are more accommodations I could list. At this point, I've lost count of how many I've shared, but yeah. Thank you for listening. This is inspired by the ongoing trend on YouTube where women are sharing accommodations they've made for themselves with either they have ADHD or they're autistic or they have both. I wanted to share this to encourage women in my community, because many women actually have undiagnosed either autism or ADHD. I know because I see you. And you're not just forgetful, or you're not just depressed and tired all the time. There could be more to it. I want to encourage you to do your research, and if you can get diagnosed and support yourself better, that is all the best. Another accommodation I think I should wrap up with is to encourage you that God knows how you are. God loves you. You're literally a superstar. God loves you. God knows how you are. And the best thing you can do to yourself is also know yourself and how you operate and work. Which brings me to a very funny interaction that happened, I think, was it last week at church? So we got a divine instruction, and I didn't interpret the instruction the way the instruction was meant to be interpreted, because, sometimes I don't interpret the subtext of things properly. And so I started carrying out this instruction for like 2 days. Tell me why the pastor called me and she was like, "How you doing? I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing it." She's like, "How are you doing it?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is how I'm doing it." And she's like, "Yeah, no, when I meant the ground, I meant the earth." I was like, "Oh, because you said ground." I'm like, ground can be like the ground. Do you know what I mean? She's like, "No, the ground means the earth." I'm like, "Okay, but you're calling me to tell me this." And she's like, "Yeah, because God was like, you're not doing it the exact specific way." And I found that so fascinating, because usually when I get like directives or I'm having conversation, Holy Spirit is giving me like tips on what to do, what not to do, I'm not even kidding you. Like, God will speak to me in ways that accommodate like my neurodivergence. Like, do this at this time. And I know like when I go and I do it at that time, I end up not having like some sensory overload, I would not be tempted into a crash out. Nothing is going to come and destabilize my emotions. Vis-a-vis when I don't do it, I do certain things at the times when I'm led to do them or in a specific way. How God is literally very direct with me, like very direct with me. And it's so interesting because when you fellowship, I have to bring in faith now a bit because it's all interconnected, right? When you fellowship with other believers or other people who share the same faith as you, sometimes their experiences can be very different from our own experiences, and that can make us feel alienated, make us feel like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not doing this right, you're doing this right. I trust me when I say this to you, God will meet you wherever you are and support you exactly how you need to be supported, which is why it makes it very, very vital I think that's why representation becomes vital, because we see people who share similar, not the same, but similar lived experiences with us, and seeing that lets us know that certain things are possible for us. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, which leads me to another thing that has helped me with accommodating myself as a woman with, both autism and ADHD, is I'm not male-centered. Yeah, I'm not male-centered. Whatever resources, whatever things I'm reading are coming from a place where, as a woman, how does this impact me? How does this support me? And how does this, exactly. So that becomes important, in my opinion, that you decenter and recenter men. You have to find where you really need them to go specifically, and where the role you need them to fulfill, without thinking whatever input they share or not is more valuable than your own input, your own lived experiences, and those of other women. That is very important, because oftentimes internalized misogyny really has us running our lives based on how men run their lives. We know the world is mirrored or made, or systems are created to benefit them, to center them, but still it is important for us to build our own personal systems that center us. Do you understand what I mean? Am I waking up 5 a.m. because I want to, because I need that pre-dawn quiet or whatever? Or is it only that way just because of a partner that will not support me that way, or family that will not support me that way? It's very important for you to decenter not only men, but also your family, especially if you're an African young woman who has ADHD. You need to decenter them and recenter them. Find somewhere else in your life what specifically you need from them, what you need them to be doing, put them there, what exactly you'll be doing for them, and have that exchange, healthier exchange. All right, I think these are all the accommodations I wanted to share. I wanted to cover an intersection of things, because they all impact our mental well-being and our emotional health. Thank you for listening. I don't know if I've said this before, but thank you for listening again. And till next time.